It's the 80th anniversary of VJ Day, which was Victory over Japan Day. On the 15th of August 1945, Japan surrendered, and it was effectively the end of the Second World War. People flocked to the streets of London and New York, dancing and kissing to celebrate the end of the war. For those serving abroad, there was no celebration, and for those who had died, they were buried where they fell. But one was buried here, in Brookwood Cemetery. He was part of the forgotten army who helped to bring victory over Japan. MC in bar, so that's a military cross, which was for huge bravery.
Absolutely.
And the bar means that he got it a second time.
Won it twice.
So who were the soldiers of the forgotten army, and how did we get to the end of World War II? After the Germans signed unconditional surrender on the 8th of May 1945, the war was not yet over. British and Commonwealth forces were fighting in the Far East, especially in Burma. They were called the Forgotten Army. But why were they fighting? In December 1941, the Japanese attacked the American Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor. Japan had decided to ally itself with Germany, and it also started to attack the British colonies of Hong Kong, the Philippines, and Malaysia. In response, Britain deployed the British and Commonwealth troops to defend its colonies. By 1945, around 365,000 British and 1.5 million Commonwealth troops were deployed across Asia and the Pacific. The forces fighting in this theatre were extraordinarily diverse and came from across the British Commonwealth, with particularly significant contributions coming from pre-partitioned India, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Australia. It is estimated that at least 40 languages were spoken in the principal fighting force in the region, the 14th Army. One of their commanders, Viscount Slim, is reported to have told his men, "None will know where you were and what you did. You are and will remain the Forgotten Army." Even here, in the United Kingdom's largest Commonwealth War Grave cemetery, there are very few casualties from the Far East.
Because of the way in which the Commission commemorates the dead, which is in the theatres in which they fell, it means that those commemorations, those burials, those memorials dedicated to those men and women are overseas. They are in the Far East. And that perhaps is one of the many reasons why armies like 14th Army has this sobriquet of the Forgotten Army. So we're standing in a cemetery with more than 5,000 burials, very few of whom have any link to that war in the Far East.
One of them is named on the 1939-45 memorial at Brookwood Military Cemetery. This is the memorial to the missing. Lieutenant General Herbert Lumsden, who died at sea off the Philippines on board an American warship. And how does he die?
So Lieutenant General Lumsden has both the misfortune of being the most senior army commander of the British Empire killed during the Second World War.
Really?
And he's on the bridge of the USS New Mexico when it's hit by a kamikaze aircraft.
God. And that's his name right up there.
That's his name. So Lumsden is one of very few direct connections we have here at Brookwood that link us to the Far East campaign and obviously VJ Day.
And where's the other one?
The other one is in the Australian plot.
Let's go and have a look.
So we're now approaching the grave of Major Keith Robert Knox. Knox was a soldier of Australian ancestry but serving with the King's Own Scottish Borderers. He has a fairly illustrious career in the army. He wins an MC and bar. The second of those MCs is one in the war in Burma. He's repatriated with war wounds. He undergoes a relatively serious operation, and it's in 1946 that he dies. But there is your direct link between Brookwood here in Surrey and the war in the Far East.
And VJ Day, remembered through him.
Absolutely.
The first few years of the war in Asia and the Pacific were marked by defeat, including the fall of Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Singapore. More than 120,000 British and Commonwealth personnel lost their lives fighting the war against the Japanese in the Far East. The soldiers who were captured alive were forced to live in brutal conditions. Some were employed building the Burma to Thailand Railway, also known as Death Railway. It cost the lives of over 15,000 prisoners of war and around 80,000 local labourers. But in 1944, things started to change. And by early 1945, British troops had effectively recaptured Burma, today's Myanmar. Then, Germany surrendered to the Allies on the 8th of May. Victory over Europe Day happened. But that didn't mean that the war was over. In fact, many more soldiers died in different battlefields months after VE Day. Between VE Day and VJ Day, how many were killed or died of wounds?
Speaking from a British and Commonwealth perspective, we can say that more than 15,000 people died between VE Day and VJ Day. And some of those men, as you can see, are even buried here.
The Japanese army had vowed to carry on fighting after Germany surrendered. Even Churchill, in his VE Day address, highlighted the importance of the fight against Japan. The war wasn't over yet.
But let us not forget for a moment the toils and efforts that lie ahead. Japan, with all her treachery and greed, remains unsubdued.
On the 26th of July 1945, the United States, Britain and the Allies issued an ultimatum to Japan, demanding the unconditional surrender of Japanese forces. But the Japanese government ignored it. Then the unthinkable happened. The United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japanese cities. One on Hiroshima, a city of industrial and military significance, on August the 6th. And then another on Nagasaki, a large seaport, on August the 9th. Over 200,000 people were killed by the bombs and radiation sickness. 6 days later, on the 15th of August 1945, Japan announced its surrender.
Acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
It was a brutal end to a war that had already caused so many deaths. The world shuddered at the first use of nuclear weapons in warfare. For people in Britain, peace meant time to rebuild what was destroyed. And for those who had been fighting abroad, victory had another important meaning. For British and Commonwealth troops who are in the Far East, what must it have been like for them? Finally, the war was over.
It means going back, and they haven't been able to do that for basically the entirety of their service. And so the proximity of the war in Europe to the UK makes that distance is far less. And this is that moment where they get to come home, and I can't imagine what that would have felt like for them.
In the UK, huge crowds were seen gathering to cheer King George VI and Queen Elizabeth on their way to Westminster for the opening of Parliament that day. The government announced a 2-day public holiday. Spontaneous street parties took over the streets of the capital. In Britain, the 15th of August 1945 came to be known as Victory over Japan Day. The soldiers who helped bring victory in Japan never got the chance to celebrate. In later years, they felt they'd been forgotten.
And we felt, right, the war's over now. We are forgotten, yeah. We were 10,000 miles away from wherever. And but that feeling soon went. Actually, the lads were glad to get home.
However, there is one veteran from the Far East campaign who believes they were never called the Forgotten Army.
Fought in India, from India to Burma. And we were part of the British 14th Army under General Slim. Some of them used to say the Forgotten Army. For me, that I fought there, it's not true. Slim did not mention to his soldiers about us. I don't believe, because some of the soldiers also wounded. Later, they came to the hospital. I was there with them. They were there before the war ended. And they told me General Slim congratulated all our troops, congratulated the division, and they brought them to the hospital. So if anybody tell you it's a lie, I'm telling you. Me, I believe that it is true, that we fought and we were congratulated.
There are very few memorials to the men and women who served in the Far East. Here it is, beside the Ministry of Defence, the Chindit Memorial, which commemorates the Indian Infantry Brigade that were special forces and fought in Burma. And it's a memorial to the men and women who were so brave in that campaign. Another one on the other side of the Ministry of Defence to the Gurkhas, who came from Nepal, and they were fighting in Malaya, Singapore, and of course Burma. Another one in Mornington Crescent commemorates those who worked on, and many of them died, building the Burma Railway. It was a horrific experience for them, including my great-uncle. And then there's the massive Commonwealth Memorial Gates beside Buckingham Palace. And yet, as you go around, one small reference to Burma and the Forgotten Army, a reminder of how forgotten it was. The VJ commemorations this year will be a way to mark the end of the Second World War, with gratitude to all those who are buried in cemeteries like this one around the world. They may have been the Forgotten Army, but today they are remembered.